Hey guys, so here's part 2 of the 4.9 notes. We're going to continue to solve systems of quadratic equations algebraically. Okay, let's look at example 2. So don't forget, the first thing is we need to make sure we solve each equation for y. So if we look here, we have x squared plus y equals negative 4 and y equals negative 5x plus 2. Now it looks like only one equation is solved for y. It's our second one. So that means we need to solve for y for our first equation here. So to do that, I'm going to just move the x squared over. So I'm going to have y equals, and in order to move that over, I have minus x squared. So I subtracted it to the other side, and then minus 4. Okay, now that we solved each equation for y, we're going to set them equal to each other. So I have negative x squared minus 4 equals negative 5x plus 2. Okay, so now remember, we want to try to keep x squared positive. And notice here it's negative, so I definitely will have to move it over to the right side. Now, our next thing is to decide, are we going to be factoring or are we going to be taking the square root? If we factor, we have to make sure we set our equation equal to 0. So move everything to one side. If we are solving by taking the square root, then we keep the base squared on one side and move everything else to the other. Now, in order to know, remember, if we are factoring, we are going to have an x squared term, an x term, and a constant. So let's look here. So notice we do have an x squared term. That's always going to be there. But notice we also have an x term. And what I mean by x term is we have this negative 5x. So there's a number with the x. And then we have our constants. So since we have all three of those terms, we are actually going to be using factoring on this problem. So I'm going to take everything that I see on my left-hand side, so the negative x squared minus 4, and move that over to the right-hand side. Because I'm going to factor, and I need to make sure I set it equal to 0. So in order to do that, I'm going to add x squared and add 4 to both sides. Now be careful, make sure you combine like terms. So x squared doesn't have any like terms, so we keep it as x squared. Then we have minus 5x, and then the 4 and 2, those are like terms, so I can combine them to get me 6. So be careful when you're combining like terms. This is when we also did factoring, okay? Okay, now we are going to solve. So remember, we should get 2 answers and write them as ordered pairs. Okay, so to factor, we have 2 sets of parentheses. Here, a value is 1, so I just find all the numbers that multiply to our last term, the constant, which is 6. So we have 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Which pair will add up to our middle term of negative 5x? That will be 2 and 3. And in order to get to negative, both of them need to be minus. So now we set each factor to 0 and solve. So remember, x minus 2 is a factor, and x minus 3 is a factor. So I get x equals 2 and x equals 3. So now from there, I'm going to plug the 2 and 3 back into one of these equations to get my y value. Now remember, when you plug it back in, pick the easier one, which I would suggest maybe the second equation, y equals negative 5x plus 2, is your easier equation to plug those x values into. Okay, let's start with the 2. So I have y equals negative 5 times 2 plus 2. So when I get that, I get negative 10 plus 2, which gives me negative 8. And then for my 3, I get negative 5 times 3 plus 2. So I get negative 15 plus 2, which gives me negative 13. Now, are we finished? No, because we have to write these as ordered pairs here to get our answers. So our first order pair, we have the x of 2 and the y of negative 8. So I have 2, negative 8. Be careful when you're solving which one's the x and which one's the y. Remember, when we write ordered pairs, we do x, y. And then for my second one, my x is a 3 and my y is a negative 13. So my 2 solutions are 2, negative 8 and 3, negative 13. Okay, we're going to go ahead. I know I said I was going to do 3 parts for the video for 4.9, but we're going to go ahead and do number 3 and just do 2 parts for videos. So it's a little bit short. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do number 3. This time, I actually would like you to pause the video and go ahead and try to solve this out. Okay, let's see where you got to, and if you need to pause the video anytime and like you want to continue on, go ahead and do that. Okay, we have y equals negative 6x plus 4 and y minus 12 equals x squared. First thing is, we need to make sure each of these equations is solved for y. The first one is, but we got to solve for y on the second one. So to do that, I'm going to add 12 to the other side. So I'm going to get x squared plus 12. Now, I can set both of these equations equal to each other. So I have negative 6x plus 4 equals x squared plus 12. So remember, we want to keep our x squared positive. And notice it is already positive, so I'm going to keep it on my right-hand side. Now, we need to decide, are we going to factor or take the square root on both sides? In order to factor, we have to have 3 different terms. We need to have an x term, you need to have something of an, or x squared term, you need something of an x term, and the constant. If we were just taking the square root of both sides, you would just have an x term, or x squared term, and you would have the constant. There's no x term. So let's see what we have. We do have an x squared term. We do have an x term, that's the negative 6x, and we have our constants. So because we have that x term, we are going to factor. And in order to factor, we need to set this equation equal to 0. So to keep my x squared positive, I'm going to move everything. So negative 6x plus 4, I'm going to move that to the right-hand side. So I'm going to add 6x and subtract 4 from both sides. Be careful when you're adding like terms, okay? So I get 0. There's nothing else that is an x term or x squared term, so I keep it there. 6x is just going to be 6x. So notice that I cannot combine my x squared and x terms because they are not the same, so be careful. And then I do 12 minus 4, so that gives me plus 8. And notice I kind of keep it in a standard form, so I do x squared, then the x term, and the constant. We want to do that because it'll make it easier to factor. Okay, so now let's go and factor. So this is a part where you can pause again and then go ahead and keep going and solve for the rest. Then go ahead and do that. Okay, let's find all the numbers that multiply to 8. So we got 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Which two terms or which two numbers will add up to our 6x in the middle? That will be 4 and 2. And in order to add up to a positive, both of these need to be positive. So now we set each of our factors equal to 0. X plus 2 is a factor, and x plus 4 is a factor. So I get x equals negative 2, and x equals negative 4. So now I plug both of these back into one of the equations. Remember, you want to plug it back into the easier equation. So if we look here, which one is it? I think the first equation, y equals negative 6x plus 4, is going to be the easier. So I'm going to plug it back into that one. So I have y equals, and I have negative 6 times negative 2 plus 4. So negative 6 times negative 2 gives me 12 plus 4. That will give me 16. And when I plug negative 4 into there, so I have y equals negative 6 times negative 4 plus 4. When I do negative 6 times negative 4, that gives me 24 plus 4 gives me 28. Are we finished? No, because we need to write our answers as ordered pairs. So I have x equals negative 2, and my y is 16. So to write that as an ordered pair, I have negative 2, 16. And then for my other one, I have negative 4 as my x and 28 as my y. So I have negative 4, 28. And those two are my solutions. Okay, make sure if you have any questions, you contact me, and make sure you work on the homework assignment. See you guys later.